So I'm pleased now to be joined by Dr. Julie Swain. Julie is not only a cardiac surgeon, but was also very prominent at the FDA for years and is now professor of cardiac surgery at Mount Sinai. Thanks for, this is a small meeting here of 1,200 of our best friends. So Julie, you for years helped us so much with designing clinical trials and looking at all that. Where do you think, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming transmitral valve, transcatheter mitral valve repair surgeries, these sort of things. Where do you think that if we look at these trials, are they going to be similar to what went on with TAVR?
Well, and what went on with TAVR, yes, is similar to what goes on with really any projects like left ventricular assist devices and any other medical product. What you really need on a trial early on is that you have a standard of care. And my definition of standard of care is if they walk into your office, what treatment would the patient get?
Right.
And that's the standard of care. And then you compare it to a new device, in this case, transcatheter mitrals, mitral repair or mitral replacement.
Right.
So the key is for each patient population that you look at, what would you do as a physician if the patient came in your office? And that's the control group. So it's always really important to have a control group because the control group really determines how you design the trial. How long the endpoint is. If it's a control group of 30-year-olds with MR of 1+, you might have to have an endpoint of 3 or 4 or 5 years. If it's all people who are at the highest risk, who are inoperable, who are going to die soon, then you'll have a much shorter endpoint. And then you decide what the endpoint should be. If you have a trial of 30-year-olds, an endpoint of death is just not going to do it. If you have an older group, an endpoint of death may well do it. So that's what the trials are going to look like.
My ignorance is showing here, but didn't the transcatheter or the TAVR start out with really a population where the endpoint was not a 30-year survival? I mean, these were people that were critically ill.
Yes.
Are we going to see a similar thing, you think, with the transcatheter mitral trials?
I think so. In most early stage innovative devices, you try on people who it's really their last option, and you get the design worked out, the things that you don't know that you need to determine on design of devices. So that's always a reasonable way to start. When you're starting on mitral repair devices for degenerative disease, that's a young population. So that will be a different population with different endpoints than end-stage heart failure patients.
I know that you're not involved in designing these trials, but give me your best estimate of what do you think these trials are going to look like?
Yeah, I'm kind of involved in helping design some of these trials, and I think that first of all, a randomized study is the only way you're going to develop good scientific information. Now, it may be randomized against medical therapy, or it may be randomized against an approved device, although we have no approved devices for mitral valve replacement or repair for any large populations. So it'll be a randomized trial. It depends on the patient populations to be chosen, and most importantly, the two different diseases that you all have taught us about, ischemic disease or secondary mitral regurgitation and primary. Two very different trials, very different patient populations, so that has to be taken into account.
So, would you anticipate that it's going to be different trials for the primary versus secondary? Do you think the trials will begin with secondary because of the nature of that disease process?
Secondary is almost easier because you have end-stage patients who are optionless, and we have absolutely no proof yet that surgical intervention in secondary MR, we had the big trial, the NIH trial of many $1 million that compared repair and replacement. My view is that trial should have compared medical therapy and some intervention. So that's a somewhat easier population. And then degenerative disease is somewhat harder because surgical treatment is so incredibly good for that disease, as we've seen this morning.
No, absolutely. So let me let you put on your really futuristic cap here. And where do you think we're going to be with the future? If you had to look 5 to 10 years down with the TMVR, where do you think we're going to be?
Well, I think TMVR is is here to stay, and it's going to be like TAVI's doing now, gradually extending into patient populations that less sick, and because the risk benefit of surgery may start changing when you start having better devices that have long-term durability, which we haven't proven yet, even in the TAVI space. So I view it as about 3 different eras of introducing any new innovative medical device. The initial era is randomized trial against current therapy, being open surgery or medical therapy. The mid is a randomized trial against approved devices for those patient populations. And finally, like with left ventricular assist devices, we can get to a point where we can develop performance goals, that we have a robust population of patients in trials. We know what the devices do. There's no more surprises of things breaking, although there has been for LVADs. And we can get to where you can have a single-arm trial with very good registries and performance goals. So 10 years, maybe we'll be at the registry, single arm. 5 years, I think we'll be still at randomized against standard therapy for some and maybe against approved devices.
It's a very interesting world. I mean, if somebody came to you and said, Dr. Swain, I want to be a cardiac surgeon. I'm in my last year of training. Should I learn catheter skills versus surgical skills, or what should I do? What would you tell them?
I don't think there's really a versus, because the hand-eye coordination required for a surgeon, sorry, cardiologists, really adapt you to do interpret imaging and to push catheters. It's just, different than holding a needle holder. You're holding a catheter with some controls on it. So I think surgeons are well positioned that, and it's like vascular surgery. There are virtually no vascular surgeons now who don't do transcatheter interventions. You have to be able to do both, and surgeons are well positioned to do that.
I think you're exactly right, but I guess where I was going, does the surgeon need to have specific training in surgical skills?
Yes.
Versus, where I'm getting at is because I hear young surgeons talking about all the time, well, I need to spend more time in the catheter-based skills, and I'm saying, gee, I'd really like you to know how to do an open heart operation.
Well, right now for transcatheter valves, be it TAVI or mitral, we really don't have a lot of products in. It's a small transcatheter population, and the cardiologists and the surgeons who are doing it, there's really a limited number of cases, so it's hard to train a general cardiac surgeon doing that. In the future, it's going to be like cholecystectomies, gallbladders. That's part of the training. But the poor people that are training now, cardiac surgeons, are going to have a hard time getting access to be able to train on these devices.
Excellent point. Listen, Julie, thank you so much. You've educated me, and it certainly is an exciting. I've never been more excited about valvular heart disease now. The abilities to help people in various ways.
It's a great time for imaging, which is the key, and then fixing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.